So hello to everyone. My name is Luciano Saso. I'm the UNICA president. It is a great pleasure to be here to welcome you at this important meeting, UNICA IRO Group online workshop on Digital Erasmus Plus with a very nice title, The IROs meets the ITs. This topic is very important for UNICA. It's also very important for me personally. As you might know, I was there in the beginning together with Valère Meus from University of Ghent, to start the Erasmus Without Paper project several years ago. And we are very happy to see that our baby now is a teenager and really developing so well. I want to thank very much the higher education unit of the DG EAC and especially Nadia Manzoni, Alexandra Licht and Théo Mink for partnering with UNICA for this important event. I want to thank Mina Kutanyami, the coordinator of the UNICA IRO Group, and all of you online for participating in this event. I know that we are all looking forward to the presentation, so I don't want to take too much of your time at this moment, but just to thank you for the organization, also the UNICA office with Laura Brossico, Alexandra Duarte, Laura Colò, and I wish you a very pleasant and fruitful meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciano. So my name is Minna Koutaniemi. I'm working here at the University of Helsinki, and I'm the chair of this group, and I'm really welcoming you warmly to this meeting that I find really relevant at the moment. And as you can see, there are more than 70 participants today with us. So I think this is something that motivates us to use our 2 hours with these excellent colleagues from the European Commission. Nadia, Alexandra and Théo, welcome to our meeting. And I also want to remind you all that this is like a follow-up for the first meeting that we had in autumn. And now, after about 6 months, the situation has changed a bit. At least here in Helsinki, we have had already the application round for outgoing students, and we are opening the call for incoming students for the next academic year. So when I was preparing myself to this meeting, I was thinking, what have we done during these last 6 months? What have we learned about Erasmus Without Papers processes? What we have faced, what difficulties, what problems, what solutions we have had, and so on and so on. And I really want to thank you all that you have filled in the questionnaire that we sent beforehand, and that you have replied in many numbers, and send also very good questions to our presenters today, so that we can really meet the needs and the questions that you have in mind during this next 2 hours. So Laura and Alexandra, they have given you some advices how to name your name and university and the group that you are joining later on. So please do that. And if you have any questions how to do that, just follow up the chat. And here in the beginning, do you have, Laura, something to add before we start?
Alexandra will give a few instructions.
Very good. Thank you, Alexandra.
Well, I don't have much to add except for please do not forget to rename yourself with the name, the institution, and very importantly the breakout room, because even though we pre-assign you to the breakout room, sometimes it doesn't work, so we have to do it manually. So to make it a bit quicker, it's essential that you put the breakout room. And for any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. We will collect them, and then we will give them to the speakers to reply at the end. And if you want to address a speaker in specific, please do not forget to mention that as well. And I guess that it's all, so we can carry on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So we go ahead, and please, Nadia, Alexandra and Théo, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I will start and then pass on the floor to my colleagues. Thank you for being here today. We are indeed at quite an important moment in this initiative, and happy to have this opportunity to share a bit in more detail what is going on and how we see things developing and why are we doing all of this. At the moment, I can only see a black screen, but it's, I guess, coming in a minute. Okay, so I hope this will be a myth-busting session, and I hope it will be an opportunity to hear also from you what can be improved and how this initiative could serve your needs better, because that's the ultimate goal. So the European Student Card Initiative, more than a student card, don't be fooled. It is many different things in one. Let me unpack this a little bit. If we go to the next slide. I'll talk about what is the policy behind it and what is sort of the roadmap, a general roadmap in the coming years for digitalization of the Erasmus Plus mobility management. We have a wind in our sails with the European Strategy for Universities that has been published on the 18th of January this year. So since we last saw some of you in this forum, and the new thing is, the European education area communication and goals have already been around for a few years, but with this strategy now, we really have an acknowledgement at the political level that the universities cannot develop without being digitally interconnected. And the European Student Card Initiative is really one of the most visible ways in which to do so. I'm sorry that you cannot see the slides. I think you're going to be able to see them in a minute. And this has now given us a momentum and a boost to invest a lot of resources. And perhaps you're not seeing the effects of these resources right now immediately, as it takes some time to make big improvements. But certainly we see over the next 2 to 3 years really a lot happening on this scene. On the next slide, you will see that the European Student Card Initiative is one of the 4 so-called flagship initiatives that the Commission has put forward for the higher education sector, next to the European University Alliances that you might know, the legal statute, the joint degree at European level, and then there's the European Student Card Initiative. And in particular, the deployment of a unique student identifier, as it was recognized that in order to recognize a student and to make their life easier and make the data exchange easier between different universities, we need to be able to know who these students are. Let's say a digital passport or a digital identity card. We do it with the European Student Identifier, and my colleague Théo will say a bit more about it later. But apart from the European Student Identifier, this policy is that we roll out the European Student Card Initiative, including Erasmus Without Paper, over the next 4 years by mid-2024 at full speed. What are the goals of this initiative? Just to recap a little bit, on the next slide, you will see that it feeds into all the horizontal priorities of the Erasmus Plus program. In other words, we are trying to green the Erasmus Plus program. Next slide, please. And the program administration that you probably very well know is very paper heavy. And this from application stage to the sharing of the transcript of records. And important to say, we would like to have this rolled out to all types of mobilities, even though we're just starting with the mobility for studies, for intra-European mobility of studies, which is our first starting point. And we're only starting with the learning agreement digitalization and the interinstitutional agreement digitalization. But what I'm sure you will agree with as IROs is that we need to really complete all the administration steps for all the types of mobilities for this initiative to really address your needs and move from paper to digital. And there we have a really long road ahead. It's a lot of business processes that you have each been doing in your own way that now have to be standardized, that we have to harmonize and agree at almost European level how to digitalize these things and make a lot of decisions. And in the next steps, when we digitize outside of papers or documentation for mobilities with universities outside of the EU, we'll have another set of issues. When we look at traineeship agreements, we'll have another set of issues, and so on. And other sectors are already knocking at our door. The colleagues doing VET mobility, vocational education and training mobility, are already saying, you have a great thing here, can we join? And we're like, whoa, hold your horses. We have to first make sure the systems are fit for purpose, and then we can spread. And this is what we're doing now. Then the Digital Erasmus Plus program, sorry, I can still see a box on the screen. Yeah, thanks. The Digital Erasmus Plus program, meaning we're trying to digitalize the program by allowing all the actors in the process to not have to identify everywhere and in different IT systems, and to gain efficiency. And we are still not there, but this is the goal. We hope that this whole process will also make the program more inclusive. How? Especially with the Erasmus Plus app, for instance, and using these digital tools and the European Student Card, we hope that it will be less daunting and less cumbersome for people to take part in the program. And as a result, we hope to have a better, sense of European student identity among those who participate in the program. All of these are commitments in the Erasmus Charter for Higher Education, as you probably know, and all applicants for the Charter have committed to it upfront to digitalize the Erasmus Plus. Now, how we do it and when, this is another thing, but the commitment is already there, and there will also be monitoring associated with it. So the national agencies will have a role to play in checking that the universities are really indeed digitalizing as committed in the HE program. Don't be scared. We are now really working with other universities, and with the national agencies and university and student stakeholders in the so-called HE working group. And we are defining how this monitoring will really look like. It will certainly not be some kind of HE police going around and saying you have not digitalized, but it's supposed to be a supportive process. It's supposed to be a bit of an encouragement for universities to move along at a good speed. The next slide, I outline all the different things that come under this European Student Card Initiative roof. And then we will go into them one by one. So the prerequisite for these digital data exchanges is to be able to communicate with the Erasmus Without Paper registry, or the Erasmus, to participate in the Erasmus Without Paper network. To enter this network, either via the Erasmus Without Paper dashboard, or via a software provider, a commercial provider for mobility management, or via your own in-house system. And here the colleagues from the University of Warsaw, that are now currently in the Erasmus Without Paper Plus consortium, have done miracles to get HE holders connected. And I know not every university is there yet, so we're working really hard to onboard everybody, especially those who, or in particular, those who do study mobility, to have some form of study mobility in this year's call. And to also make this onboarding process smoother in the future. Once connected, these universities then exchange data, and so far this is possible for the learning agreements and for the interinstitutional agreements. And the next steps are transcripts of records and applications and nominations. Again, I know it's for those who are still in the process of connecting or in the process of testing and so on, it might seem daunting to think about the timeline, but think about it this way: we have to set out the goals for the next 4 years and where we are going if we're going to mobilize such a huge amount of universities and huge amount of commercial providers that we have no control over, to be very open. Then, so we've been developing the Erasmus Without Paper network, and we continue to do so. Secondly, for universities that have small flows, mobility flows, it doesn't make sense to join big software providers, and that's why we have set up and financed the Erasmus Without Paper dashboard that many of you are familiar with. It is a software, and it is intended to precisely for those institutions that have small flows. It's also a sort of reference architecture, if you want. So it's been an important trend setter, let's say, and an important partner to test with. So the teams in the dashboard have been overwhelmed with the amount of testing they had to do, whether the connections and the data exchanges with other software providers work or not. So there, after a long time, we're able to really, again, boost the capacity. We were able at the beginning of this year to really boost the capacities of the dashboard teams to complete these testings, to publish the results, to sort out the problems, to improve bugs, to improve the service desk. So my colleague Alex will say a little bit where we are with that in a minute. Linked to that is the Erasmus Plus app, a sort of student-facing infrastructure that is supposed to offer more information at the fingertips of students, but also offer the digital services for students. Some commercial providers have their own apps. Some universities have their own apps, and the idea is not really to override them or to replace them, but rather to fill the gap where students don't have such opportunity. And we are really promoting very hard this app so that, because we see it as an inclusion element as well, to have all this to have an option to reach directly into the smartphones of students. And there the potential is huge, and Alex will tell you about it in a minute, that we can go in so many directions with the Erasmus Plus app to make it really useful as a digital tool for students going on mobility and to replace certain paper workflows. So we hope to really improve it even further in the next years. The fourth part is sometimes overlooked because it's quite technical, but it's key. We need to be able to be sure that when students and anyone, in fact, log into this digital infrastructure, that they are really truly who they claim to be, as they have to sign important documents once they are on these systems. Previously, they'd come into the office, sign, so you know it's them. But now we have to do the same in digital means. And here we have a whole area of work around the student authentication via My Academic ID, and therefore also the European Student Identifier as a way to make sure that the data here and there matches the same person. And finally, to also improve the actual student experience, we have a final element, which is the European Student Card, to confirm the student status of a participant when they go abroad. And this goes a little bit beyond also Erasmus without paper, and because it can benefit also students on other types of mobilities than Erasmus, or even, as we heard, students within the same country sometimes. So it's a bit of a broader project, but still part of all of this package. And it's really kicking off this at the start of the next academic year, the onboarding of new universities. So we have some novelties to share with you there as well. I hope you're still with us, as it's quite a lot to take in. We're happy to answer clarification questions in a minute. My colleagues will now go a bit more in depth, so I leave the floor to my colleague Alex, who is in charge of the Erasmus Without Paper project. She will also reshare the slides so that we solve some technical issues. And then we continue on Erasmus Without Paper.
Hi, everyone. Just give me a moment. I will reshare the slides. Okay, I think you're able to see my slides now, right?
Yes.
Can anyone confirm? Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
good.
it's fine.
Excellent. So my name is Alex, and I will present the Erasmus Without Paper, so network, dashboard, some questions that you might have. So Erasmus Without Paper, what is it for? So basically, the Erasmus Without Paper is for Erasmus coordinators in universities to manage mobilities more efficiently. So the idea is actually replace paper exchanges with in IT systems. And of course, this makes sense because we're already doing so many things online, also signing official governmental documents and so on. So why not also the mobility documents? Now, how? The idea is that the EWP will connect, Erasmus Without Paper will connect a multitude of student information systems. So as we said, as Nadia explained, a dashboard, in-house system, but also software provider systems with the use of APIs. And the processes that the network supports is exchange of digital signature of learning agreements, interinstitutional agreements, and in the future, not yet, exchange of transcript of records and student application and nomination for certain parts of the network members. Now that's a scheme of how it looks like. So basically we have a lot of interconnected elements. So we have the dashboard, as we mentioned. We have the Erasmus Plus app, which is also connected to the dashboard. As institutions that use the dashboard, they can offer their students to sign learning agreements through the app. We also have the EWP registry, where we have all the institutions there and the information, how do they exchange and so on. And the registry is fed by the dashboard, but also by third-party software solutions, and also by in-house solutions. And what does it mean? That when we look at the EWP network components, we see that it is not a unified landscape. So we have various institutions using various systems and connect to the network in various ways. And that also means that there is, of course, a lot of work that needs to be put in and is put now into ways to make the system function better. So all the parts, all the elements will be able to communicate in the best possible way. Now, this is an update. It's updated to end of February 22, and we see that we have quite a lot of traffic on EWP network. So we have a lot of nodes, which means connections in production. So points, HEIs that are connected to the network. And we have also 670 nodes in development, which means that HEIs that are developing their connection, in the process of connecting. And this is in terms of the network. So it's quite of a high number, and we're very happy. And we know that it requests a lot of resources, a lot of input, and a lot of work from institutions. And we see that this work is being done. In terms of the dashboard, we have over 3,000 registered HEIs in the dashboard, and we have the number of OLAs and IAs signed, which is also very high. And here, these are the numbers in total. So we have OLAs 152, above 152,000 online learning agreements exchanged, and over 13,000 interinstitutional agreements signed. Now, within these numbers, we have, when we look at the dashboard specifically, we have also over 1,700 users on the dashboard who are subscribed to the IPA of IIA, which means that within all the IIAs exchanged, 77% are within the dashboard, and the same for learning agreements. So we see that indeed dashboard users are already quite advanced in their work. We can say that they're exchanging and subscribing to the API. However, it doesn't mean that the exchange runs smoothly, because we know that in order to exchange, we need two parts. And this is why also we urge all institutions and all software providers to continue and test and develop to be able to exchange between the systems. Now, as you might know, or maybe not, and if you don't know, then I'm happy to announce that between January 22 and December 24, we have put a new contract for Erasmus without paper. And here is the plus, so EWP plus. And let me tell you some things about this contract. So as you might know, EWP and in general the components of European Student Card were tackled in previous grant agreements and various projects. And now within this contract, we bring everything into one roof, under one financing, under one following up, and also from it will make it easier for the consortium EWP Plus to follow up the work, but also from our side, it will be easier to manage one big contract rather than various grant agreements. And what does it mean? Let's look closer at this contract. So the key EWP tenants, and this there are slides with the courtesy of the consortium that have shared with us. The tenants, the main elements that the contract will tackle is business continuity. It is result-oriented, iteration evolution. So we aim to solve problems and evolve towards new systems, towards new developments that facilitate the lives of universities. There is a multi-stakeholder approach. So we're not only talking to you, IROs, but also to students, also to European alliances, also to digital officers. And by universities for universities, as we have the University of Thessaloniki, University of Warsaw, University of Ghent as part of the consortium. Now, when we look at all the activities that are envisaged to EWP within this contract, we have many activities, and you see that they tackle a lot of development, there is a lot of continuity, a lot of enhanced infrastructure. So in terms of the dashboard, the network, the help desk, so providing a proper help desk which will reply to the needs of the community. Also a governance structure to engage the stakeholders and hear from firsthand from all of you what is needed and how we can build it in a better way. There is an element of outreach and communication. How can we make our communication better to mainstream our communication? There is also, of course, a need analysis of the current system, so to be able to identify problems and provide the best possible solutions. Preparation of enhanced infrastructure and, of course, further development and continuity in some elements that we already have. So you see there are a lot of work, and our colleagues in EWP Plus are indeed very busy to develop and to provide the best possible solution, but this of course takes time. Now, when we look at the goals, the idea is to have a continued availability of the digital infrastructure. So we don't want to have an interference between what was developed and what will be developed. As I mentioned, an enhanced help desk that would be able to provide you guys with the necessary answers to your questions, addressing technical debt, so addressing some technical problems that were occurred in the last years, and of course, a lot of focus is also put on outreach and communication towards you, towards the community. Now, activities that are expanded towards 23, we have a robust and participatory governance model. So within this contract, so in the next years, the idea is to have various fora with who we can consult, and the indication of the timeline, the indication of the necessary adjustment that need to be done, the necessary needs that we need to be tuned to, will come from the field, so from universities, from IROs, from digital officers, and so on and so on. Also mainstreaming the use of the European Student Identifier, support for change management, as this is a big change. We're transitioning from paper and from a way that maybe each university were managing in their own way, in their own manner. Now we want to transition to a more unified approach. And all this, of course, is a process and it takes time. That's why these activities are expanded also towards next year. Now, when we look at the digitalization timeline, this is, of course, a tentative timeline that we are always in consultation with the governance board, with the consortium, and with the feedback we receive from the community, such as the feedback today that we will get from you and the questions we will get from you. So this is the digitalization timeline, and of course it is valid if the systems are fit for purpose. Now, I hope that was clear. That's really EWP in a nutshell, and we will continue in a very smooth way to the app, because of course the app is a part of the European Student Card Initiative and the digitalization process. Now, the app, what are the available features? And we have great features available on the app. So the ability to manage administrative procedures for dashboard users. So some functionalities are available for the dashboard users, but of course we aim that's within the new contract, we will develop also that these functionalities will be available for all users. So of course, institutions will not they would not be pushed to use the app, but we would like to assure that everyone that would like to offer certain functionalities to students will be able to do so. The ESSI-based European Student Card, this is available on the app. Of course, also there is a lot of multilingual information on mobility opportunities, tips and stories, events, and a lot of community elements. And these are one of the strongest features of the app that brings students together and creates a community. Now, future features that will be available in the app starting from by the end of this year, we'll start working on them. So in 2023, these features should be available, but of course, this is also under construction and big changes are not done in a day. The ability to manage administrative procedures for all students, an expansion to more admin processes, a fully digitalized European Student Card, integration with online linguistic support with the OLS, review of mobility experience, and many, many more ideas. And these ideas we're currently starting to think about together with our colleagues from with the DOs, together with the colleagues of the current app team. We also had a very interesting event last week in Budapest that I'm sure that many of you have followed online, where we received direct feedback from institutions, from students, and what they would like to see in the app and what will be useful for them. So currently we're in the process of gathering this information and then putting it into paper and then launching the contract also for the app specifically. And within that, I guess you have many questions, but we'll have time for this also later. I'll pass the floor to my colleague, Théo. Théo, I cannot hear you, but I would pass the slides for you.
Thanks. Yes,
Yeah.
please. I'm going to share my screen.
Alexandra, I think you have to stop. Okay.
Is it working? Can you see my screen now?
I can stop
yes,
sharing.
Théo, it's working.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I have to go to my slides. So thank you, Alexandra. And now we'll present to you shortly the latest updates on the European Student Identifier and then the European Student Card. So on the European Student Identifier, just a short presentation also, because I know that there's some information that might have been missing on what it is. So the European Student Identifier is a digital identifier enabling students to uniquely identify themselves when they access student mobility services online. The aim of the European Student Identifier, or EAC, is to support and ease international student mobility and transnational cooperation of higher education institutions. The EAC is crucial to allow the smooth transfer of student data during Erasmus Plus mobilities, and it is an essential component to identify the student status through the different Erasmus Plus digital tools, including the Erasmus Plus app that Alexandra presented beforehand. The EAC is the gateway to make the European Student Card also available to students through the Erasmus Plus app. Currently, the digital European Student Card is generated through the EAC, which confirms the student status. In the future developments of the European Student Card, we are aiming to complement the EAC with a student card number that will allow to check the student status for a European Student Card router. And finally, as Nadia presented the strategy at the beginning of this presentation, the gradual deployment of the EAC is endorsed by the European Strategy for Universities. So now in terms of authentication and identification, so student mobility requires knowing both who a person is or a student is and what their home university is. Universities need to exchange students' records and students must be uniquely identified. So the EAC is of paramount importance to build a robust system of student identification, in that it plays a key role in ensuring electronic systems correctly identify students and grant access rights accordingly. This is particularly true for whitelisted HEIs, as currently they have no alternative ways to release academic attributes. But I will come to the whitelist in a few slides. Now, the European Student Identifier is globally unique, persistent, non-targeted, technically independent, and GDPR compliant. It reliably identifies students across different e-services. So what do we mean by all those different adjectives? Globally unique means that each student should be uniquely identified across organizational and national boundaries. Persistent means that the identifier should follow the student all along the student mobility. Non-targeted means that the identifier should be the same for all services involved in the student mobility processes. Technically independent means that the identifier is not impacted by the different technologies used by the systems involved during the mobility. And finally, GDPR compliant means that, of course, no sensitive data from the student is exposed or will be exposed during the mobility. And so this is a bit more technical, but the European Student Identifier can take two forms, one of two forms, depending on the qualifiers needed to make a given student code globally unique. So the first one is AC with a nationwide student code, or in case a code is used at HEI level, then it will be an AC with HEI-wide student code. So this is a bit technical, but if you want more information, there's a wiki page provided by and hosted by Géant with the link here, which you can follow if you want more technical information on this. So now on how does it work, I will go briefly on this slide, but it basically, here you have a sort of diagram of how the process of authentication works to access Erasmus Plus digital services. So depending on the authentication solution used, EduGain, IDP of last resort, Google login or EIDAS, you are authentified as a student and get access to the dashboard, including the online learning agreement online manager, but also the Erasmus Plus app. In the case of EduGain and IDP of last resort, the EASY validation is already active. For the others, the idea is to, at some point, replace it with an alternative solution, such as potentially an EU login solution. Now, in terms of state of play of student authentication, a big majority of universities use EduGain and issue European Student Identifier in order to allow students to authenticate in the EWP network. A minority of institutions have national IDP solutions. It's the case for countries like Poland, France, Italy, or Spain. And around 500 universities are deploying an identity provider of last resort, whitelisted by Erasmus Plus national agencies for that purpose. So shortly on the whitelist, it's again a quite technical point, but I will try to explain it in a couple of points. The whitelist is for institutions that are not part of EduGain and do not have national IDPs. It's an alternative technical solution which has been called the identity provider of last resort, which is required in order to ensure that no entities and students are left out. Erasmus Plus national agencies provided the European Commission the whitelist per each country associated to the Erasmus Plus program. There are around 500 institutions on the whitelist across the Erasmus Plus program countries. And in practice, this means that Erasmus Plus students from the whitelisted institutions will be invited by IROs to register on the same platform where their identity will be validated by the IRO. The My Academic ID operator will subsequently generate a European Student Identifier for this student and store it directly in the My Academic ID platform. This will enable those Erasmus Plus students to have access to the Erasmus Plus student-facing digital infrastructure. After the application of the student is approved by an IRO, then they log in using Google or the national ID, and they will be automatically recognized, and their RC will be retrieved from the My Academic ID platform and made available to the relevant services, for example, the online learning agreement. So this is quite technical again. We can share later with you the different wiki pages that explain further what is the whitelist, but that was to shortly present you what is the whitelist exactly. And in terms of future development, so the ESC, also we have long-term objectives for the ESC, which is why it's such a priority for us. It should become the gateway to access the beneficiary module, but also, for example, authenticate the student status for the European student card. So this is why the ESC and the European student card are quite intertwined. And here I just wanted to show you statistics to show you the percentage per countries of IDP supporting ESC per country. So we can see that in some countries it's already at 100%, which often means that they have one solution for the countrywide, one solution for IDP. And we see it's the case, for example, for Hungary. And then there are other countries, of course, that have more different IDP solutions, and this is why they are not necessarily at 100%. So now I will go to the European Student Card and give you the short presentation also and the latest updates. So what is the European Student Card? So it's an existing national or institutional student card with European attributes. By European attributes, in technical terms, it means there's a hologram, a QR code, a European Student Identifier, and a European Student Card number. All four will contribute to authenticate the student status as part of the European Student Card. So the idea of that card is that it will enable access to on-campus and off-campus services for students when on a mobility abroad. So this includes libraries, canteens, student offers, etc. The idea is to really facilitate student mobility. Now, the current state of play is that over 2 million European student card holograms are issued, and there are over 1 million cards issued with a QR code, meaning that they are registered already. And a priority, of course, is in the future is to have digital cards rather than physical cards. And at the bottom of this slide, you can see a couple of visual examples of how this European student card would work with small logos, which you can see at the bottom or at the top of the different examples below. So how does the European Student Card work? In effect, the card issuers apply for the hologram and print it onto the cards. Then universities upload student identification data onto the European Student Card router, and the router issues a European Student Card number and a QR code that card issuers print onto the plastic or rather a digital card. And the QR code can be read by service providers on campus abroad. So now, since that contract has started since a couple of months now, I will give you also the latest updates. So there is a baseline study with initial findings that have been already submitted to us by our contractor, Entity Data. The baseline study, we actually received it on Friday. So as part of this baseline study, the idea is really to set the basis for the future implementation of the card so that we don't miss any important information before starting the implementation process. And one of the tasks of this baseline study was to identify the main stakeholders. So we identified, of course, card holders, that is students, card issuers, can be HEIs, higher education institutions, national agencies, but also student unions, of course, student services providers and how they can be included to the card, national agencies, card management system providers. Again, it can be higher education institutions, or depending on the system used, it can be also external card management system providers. And of course, card manufacturer providers and hologram providers. Now, as part of this baseline study, another important step is that our contractor created country fish per country to assess the readiness of each country to implement the European Student Card. So as part of those country fish that we are currently starting to review, we will try to assess general criteria such as the number of higher education institutions or the number of outgoing incoming students, kind of general information, but also more precise criteria, which are very important also in the framework of the future implementation of the card, such as student card situations in each country. For example, we noticed, I can give you a couple of examples from what we read already from a number of the country fish. We noticed that, for example, in countries like Estonia, Spain, or Greece, the majority of cards seems to be now digital and available through higher education institutions' own apps. Now, there's also, for those who know, the IC card, which is present in many countries, but particularly in Baltic countries. And it means, for example, that we have to work with ISICs to make sure that the EAC can be complementary to ISIC. And now in terms of communication, because we also realize that we need to take on a proper communication strategy to have a unified communication on the European Student Card, which might have been lacking in the last months and years. So we started drafting a communication strategy, and of course we defined together with the contractor the different target audiences. And we're also trying to build a ESCI informational portal, which will be a single entry point for all information on the digitalization of the European Student Card Initiative. So right now we're progressing with information architecture and wireframes design and organization of multiple sessions to co-define architecture and goal of the portal. And we're also trying to get the different authorizations at the commission level to implement it. But the idea really is that it will be a one single entry point for Erasmus without paper, for the European student card. For the SC, it will be an informational portal as a start, and then hopefully in the future it will be developed further to be more interactive. And I would like also, and that's quite important, to tell you that there's already an email for help desk that is under the responsibility of our contractor. If you have any question on the European student card, feel free to contact this email address. It's active already. Now for the upcoming events, maybe I will give back the floor to Nadia to present the upcoming events.
Thanks a lot, Theo. So already this week, Erasmus Go's digital webinars are planned for Wednesday, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and they are targeted at a different audience. The morning one at the audience of universities who use the dashboard for their mobility management, and the afternoon session for the others, so those who use commercial providers or in-house systems. And it's a series of webinars that has been going on for a while. This one is the first time, I believe, since we have made improvements via the new contracts that my colleagues have mentioned. So there's quite a lot of updates expected on Wednesday. And then on the 18th of May, there is the final conference of the project called the EDSSI project. In Thessaloniki live, and it is the project financed by the Connecting Europe Facility funds rather than Erasmus Plus like the others, and it made it possible technically to digitalize Erasmus Plus, let's say, by creating solutions for the different technical problems in doing so. Let's put it that way. So we invite you to think if it makes sense for you to attend those. And I think we are, with that, precisely on time, finished with our presentation. I think we spoke for long enough, and we look forward to the discussion. I pass the floor back to Mina.
Thank you, Nadia. So there are two ways to have questions at this point. You may write your question to the chat, or you may raise your hand so that I can pick up your comments or questions here. Okay, there's one question in chat. Can you tell more about the sharing of transcripts in 2023 and so on? Would you like to comment that question?
I can start. This is the state of play. So the creation of the so-called API for the transcript of records was part of the EDSSI project, actually. So it is something that has been started by the Erasmus Without Paper consortium partners already. And the first version has been published with the technical community on the GitHub to collect opinions and comments. The idea is that we don't rush into the digitalization of this before we truly consider all the differences in practices in different universities and so on. Because as you know, the transcript of record isn't really a unified, harmonized document. And we are now trying to create a system in which universities exchange it in precisely the same ways. So there are many challenges with that. We will have these new governance bodies, as Alex mentioned. So we will have a new forum at European level that will bring together IT officers, a new one that will bring together third-party providers, and another one that will have students and university alliances there. So we're trying to create ways in which every type of stakeholder can influence what is happening in the digitalization. And this is where the transcript of records will be discussed, how do we digitalize it and so on, before we go into true implementation. I hope this gives you a sense.
Yeah, and I like the idea that you are thinking about it from the different aspects. And also, I'm pleased to hear that the European Universities Initiative is concluded into that. Yep. There's the other question from Gudmundur. What is the future of plastic student cards? Will they continue to be phased out by electronic versions?
I can answer on this. So we really, of course, the idea is to have digital cards over plastic student cards. We're not giving any incentive to create new student card as part of the European student card. As I said, it will be more adding information on already existing student cards. And of course, the idea is that progressively they will be phased out by digital versions.
Very good, thank you. And Linnea is asking, are there any news regarding the deadline of the OLAs and DLAs? Does autumn 2022 still stands?
Thanks for that question. In fact, at the moment, it does still stand. Take that though with a grain of salt, because we are aware of the difficulties and the fact that the systems are still not fully operational, and that the percentages of exchanged learning agreements are still relatively low compared to what we would like them to be. So we are in a process. As you know, we have moved the interinstitutional agreement deadline to the end of the year, and we are in a process of considering what to do with the learning agreements, as these are interlinked. I mean, if the interinstitutional agreements get signed later, then the ensuing learning agreements would also come later. What is here the difficulty is that, you know, the deadlines are easy to communicate and everybody remembers them, but the idea was not to have, you know, the idea was to get to mobilize the whole community. That's why we need some kind of end goal to work towards. Although we don't really want them, we don't want deadlines. We want everyone just to be on board with this digitalization and move ahead as quickly as their situation enables them. Considering everyone is doing it on a practically, you know, semi-voluntary basis, just because we believe that digitalization is the right way to go and that it will help us. But we know when we receive regular communication recently from the German Rectors Conference and so on, saying that at the moment it takes longer than it used to take in the past. But that is normal that it takes longer, because we are changing processes and adjusting to new ways of working, and eventually it will not take longer to do it. So to summarize, we would like to hear from you in the breakout sessions as well about the learning agreements and what, according to you, would be the more realistic deadline. I see a hand up from Camille. He is a colleague from the University of Warsaw. Hello.
I would like to go back to the first question about transcripts.
Sure.
From the technical point of view, transfer of transcripts already exists in WP, but it is not mandatory. This mechanisms in the EWP, which we have now, will be a starting point for this mandatory solution which we will have next year. And this current solution is based on these things that are used for MREX and ELMO format and so on. So whatever will be in the next year, it won't be new thing from scratch. So it will be based on already existing solutions. So don't worry.
Nina?
Yes, sorry. Go ahead, Nadia.
No, I think that question answered. I don't know if you want me to take more.
Okay,
I see one.
very good. Well, the next one is from chat. Is the ESI like a unique per physical person or per student role? How is ESI and ESC convert with the EU citizen wallet? Are they combined somehow?
I can try answering the first question. Is ESC unique per physical person? Yes, it should be unique per physical person, because if not, we have a risk of multiple S's being delivered with different student mobilities. As for the second question, I'm not totally sure. Maybe Nadia, do you complement on the EU citizen wallet?
I don't fully understand the question. I don't know if Nikos wants to add it, explain, but at the moment, I think you mean the digital wallet that the Commission is developing. Yeah.
Yes, I can try to reply. So basically, yes, I know that some of you are aware that there is a digital wallet commission trying to develop for identification, and at this point, where it's still quite premature, because as you know, it is also under development. So the goal, eventually, it will be very nice if they will converge, because it makes sense. Why should we identify multiple times? But now, and this is a question that was also brought up in the conference in relation to the Erasmus Plus app in Budapest, now it is still premature to talk about this because we don't have yet the right tools in place. But theoretically, it definitely might be a point for thought.
Okay, so we will see that in the future, I think. Yes, there are two more questions in chat. The one is from Esther about authorization, and would it be possible through digital signature stamps or by Touch ID or through another tools?
For me, this is quite forward-looking. I wouldn't know the details about the signatures precisely, but I would love to hear from Esther to know if this is how she thinks EWP should work. I see you here from Charles University.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering, because now, for example, all as they are signed through mouse on computer, it's not very handy, I can say so. So I'm just asking if we have another tools how to do so. For example, digital signing, of course, with classical electronic digital signing, or maybe the stamps as for one unique stamp for each university, so you can sign or identify or authorize in one step more agreements or more documents. So that's my question. Or maybe differently also in app, maybe by Touch ID or maybe through other tools we already know from banking, for example. So that's my question.
No, it's great. Well, I mean, we have just done some small steps, but yeah, I don't know the details, but we've done some small steps by asking the guys who work on the European student card to see how the student card can be seen rather than a student card as a student authentication method, so that you can sign through through it. But this is the future. We don't currently support this feature right now, but we've asked them to analyze the digital possibilities of a card. And there's also another strand of work. The Commission is also building this EU sign framework building block, and we've been looking at it a little bit, but not yet a feature again that is available. But it makes a lot of sense what you say.
Yes, and I understand there are like several digital like solutions and possibilities, and we will see what the future brings to that as well. So the final question is from Ivar, and he's asking about the testing environment. What would you answer for him?
Yes, so I can try to answer this, but of course, my colleague from University of Warsaw is also welcome to add. So basically, for the test environment between the HEIs of different providers, you can find information in the GitHub where they publish in which state they're in the testing, if the testing has been completed or not. I know that this is not very straightforward to check, but it is available on the Competency Center in the GitHub. And of course, it is up to the provider to fill in the document and to send it, so it will be uploaded, but you can find it there.
Yes. So thank you for the valuable questions and the answers, of course. And now, as you see, we are 10 minutes late from the original plan, which is okay. So we have